Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and the current poll will have to carry on for another day because, as I said, if there was going to be some important news, I was going to do that. And there is some interesting news worth continuing today. So on Monday, I talked about the 7 Labour MPs who have left the party and what I personally felt about that as a decades-long supporter of the Labour Party. Since then, another Labour MP has joined them along with 3 Conservative MPs. Now, it's a bit like a no-deal Brexit, this for me. It's something I desperately don't want to happen, yet there's a certain dread fascination with it, a bit of an intellectual appeal. So anyway, on the 16th of January this year, I discussed the concept of a split in the Labour and the Conservative Party on the basis that it might result in a new centrist party. Now, I'm not saying that this week's events constitute a split. It's like 11 MPs. But you do wonder if this might not be the second stage to something larger happening. In this video, I'm going to give a little introduction to my thoughts and then go through a list of the 10 things I need and needed for this new group to be a success. I'll point out from the start here that I'm a Labour supporter and I don't want these defections, and I certainly don't want more of them. I can't imagine ever voting for this new group. Just to let you know where my bias is here. Now, the first stage was what prompted me to discuss it in the first place. The conditions existed for it. Theresa May described the Conservative Party as a broad church today. And she's right. There are Conservatives who are centre-right as well as those on the extreme right. The same may be said of Labour regarding the left wing of politics. But were you to place each MP in those parties somewhere on a political spectrum, you would likely find it following a normal distribution about the centre. A bell curve, as it's often known. Now, the majority of MPs in both parties are not that far from the centre on their respective wing. And you get fewer MPs the further along you move. But then something strange happened to both parties a few years ago. For very different reasons, unless a clever sociologist wants to point out something cunning, both parties started to move to their extremes. In the case of Labour, a very left-wing leader was elected. He's not a pragmatic leader, and so the fact that much of his parliamentary party were not with him didn't rein in his direction, well, very much at all. With the Conservatives, it wasn't that the extreme wing occupied the leadership as such, but that getting their agenda and, to put to a public vote and then winning it, albeit illegally, gave them leverage over their leadership. And so this has continued for the last few years. The Conservatives and Labour have both abandoned the centre ground, wherein general elections are won and lost, and they've pitched their standards near the fringes. But the majority of both parties are clustered around that centre, facing off against each other and wondering where their generals are. After 2 years of MPs trying to explain to their leaders that the electoral battle is where they are and not where their leader is, they've become increasingly disillusioned. But what about those on the extreme wings of each party? Weren't they equally disillusioned when their leaders were ignoring them? Yes, on a level they were. And some would join new extreme parties, but they never achieved electoral success. And why? As I said, and I say this as someone who is on the left of politics myself, you win elections by holding the centre ground. That's where most of the population, and especially the voting population, look for their government. So on the extremes, they had a choice. Join a party that matches their beliefs and be nothing more than a protest group. A good one if you get your marketing right and have, plenty of funds to swell the coffers, as UKIP did, but you'll never achieve electoral success. Or you go down the path of pragmatism and join either Labour or the Conservatives, depending on which extreme you're at, and at least you get your say in Parliament, even though you'll never really wield executive power. Except that's no longer true, is it? Those near the middle are not only rudderless in a political tempest, but they also know that this is likely to mean minority governments for the foreseeable future. British MPs still believe in the majority government model. Yes, compromise politics and coalitions work well in other countries, and we've spent 7 of the last 9 years in a hung parliament in the UK, but it's still seen as a phase that will pass once everything stops being crazy. As such, 11 MPs have so far taken the plunge and walked out on their parties. And that may remain, that number, and it might ultimately fizzle out. If nothing more happens, then another general election will bounce upon us at some point and they may lose all their seats as people choose to elect the party that they believe will win power. So why did they do it? Well, someone in the comments described the Labour MPs as career politicians. This can't be said given their actions. Career politicians don't risk their seats. They'll make sure they speak up loudly for the interests of their constituents in the Commons, and may even speak of disagreements with the party leadership, but ultimately they toe the line. They do what the leadership tells them. That's how you keep your seat and career as safe as possible. Resigning from the party that elected you is the opposite of that. That being said, this wasn't a grand suicidal gesture on their part. They haven't fallen on their swords, they've just risked their careers, not abandoned them. So they must have a plan. So what is their plan? How could they be successful in the next general election? So I think the following 10 things are what effectively are needed. 1, they need more MPs to flock to their cause. This is obvious. So far we only have a trickle. If we maintain a no-deal Brexit course, it's possible that more may join them. They need at least another 25 to become the third largest party, and then to be taken seriously by the public. If that were to happen, then it's possible that a trickle could become a flood. There'll be MPs in both parties who are not happy with their leaders, but won't risk their seats. But if they see a new popular party forming, then they might just join. 2, Labour needs to remain on the hard left. By hard left, I don't just mean far left, I mean being unopen to dialogue, with the majority of their parliamentary party. Now, John McDonnell, who's like second in command, effectively, he's the Chancellor, in the wake of the defection said that Labour is going to embark on a massive listening exercise. I don't believe a word of it, but that's a topic for an entire video on its own. But the current leadership can probably be relied upon to carry on their path until the next general election, at least. By sticking to his current style of leadership, Corbyn guarantees persistent indignation from the bulk of his MPs. So that will work to their favour. But if they did suddenly start listening and take actions to stem the flow of defectors, then that obviously may cut the new group off. 3, following on from that, Labour would need to step up its persecution of MPs who aren't slave to Corbyn's will to help the new group out. From the earliest days of his election to leader, his cult, Momentum, and those close to him have been attempting to get what they term Blairites and Brownites deselected. I've seen firsthand the attempts to bully local party members, and if you speak out against Corbyn at all, you're labelled as a red Tory. You're just a Tory in disguise. That's just the attitude all the way through. Now, it sounds fanciful really, but try to consider Corbyn's long-term plan for Labour. Think of it this way. He's lost a general election. Now, in the Conservative Party, if you're a leader who loses a general election, you generally don't get to have another chance. In Labour, they're a bit more understanding. You know, they generally give you a couple of cracks at it. Not always. Ed Miliband certainly didn't. But generally speaking, but then he resigned. But generally speaking, you're usually given a couple of cracks at it. So if he loses the next one as well, he's had his 2 goes at it. Now, would he then try and hold on? In which case, his opposition will become much stronger, or try and stay in. Or just resign. But if he resigns, he knows there's 0 chance that anyone at his position on the political spectrum will become the next leader. That's no chance. Parliamentary Party already regret nominating him. They certainly didn't want to vote for him. So he knows that his project for Labour dies when he does. He needs a successor. So the way to do this is to make sure that the Parliamentary Party, if he did have to resign the leadership, would elect someone of his mind. And the only way to do that is to let loose and carry out this campaign of deselection throughout the Labour Party, throughout the country. So that's the only way for him to secure his dynasty. But of course, what that could do is these MPs who are now going to be looking at it and thinking, hang on a minute, there's efforts to get us deselected here. They could decide, well, we're bound either way. We may as well jump before we're pushed. And if, you know, especially if there's still a couple more years to go before the next general election, they may decide to defect to this new group. They may even end up, being very close to Labour in terms of size. And at that point, if they ever even manage to match Labour in size or even exceed it in an extreme case, you end up with a situation where the public will start to take them seriously and might even consider them prospects for election. 4, on a similar line, but on the other side, the Conservatives would need to remain in the thrall of the far right. Much as with Labour, the key to getting Conservative MPs to defect is the complete abandonment of them by their leader. It's trickier than for Labour because the leadership is not actually on the far right. They're just not standing up to them. So whereas nobody will seriously believe that Corbyn will shift his position, Tory MPs may believe that May will. And maybe she will, but I don't know. 5, the movement has to attract positive attention in the country. Middle England in particular probably won't bother won't bother that, you've got this mix of Labour and Conservatives, really. Because a lot of the people they'll be appealing to will be swing voters who at one time or other will have voted for both parties. As such, they need to make sure that they are going to appeal to that middle ground, as well as potentially try and pick up votes from the Liberal Democrats who will occupy a very similar position on that political spectrum. They just need to make themselves look more electable than the Liberal Democrats. 6, they're going to need to form a cohesive manifesto and a set of guiding principles. At the moment, all we know of this group is what it's against. It's against the move to the extremes of their former parties, and so far it's against Brexit. But it needs more than that. And it's not going to be easy, as they may be clustered around the centre of politics, but some are still Labour and some are still Conservative in terms of their beliefs. The Conservative defectors, for example, today justified the work of George Osborne on the economy between 2010 and 2015 in their speech, basically, to the press. I doubt the Labour defectors were agreeing with that assessment. And just as some in the country may not bring themselves to vote for a Labour-Conservative hybrid, even if their policies ultimately appeal, the MPs themselves are going to need to find common ground bloody quickly. 7, there needs to not be an early general election. I don't know if the sequence of events that I'm describing is realistic or not. I can't know that. I still tend to believe that it's not ultimately going to happen, but if it does, and it would probably need time to flourish, they need for there not to be an early general election. 8, now following on from that, they need to hope that their former parties don't suddenly start using their brains. For example, one easy trick for Jeremy Corbyn. Do you know what? If I was Jeremy Corbyn right now, what would I do to try and stem the flow of defectors? I mean, I would say that I would actually bloody well listen to them. But let's say I was of his mind. I'd call another vote of no confidence in the government. Not to try and get in a general election. I know that's not got a chance in hell. No, not to do that. Here's the situation. As I've previously said, Labour need these Labour defectors to look like red Tories. So what do? Vote of no confidence. Then you look very, very carefully at the 8 so far Labour defectors. How are they going to vote in that? If they vote with Labour, then, well, they're voting for an early general election, which is something you would think they don't want. But if they do, okay, Jeremy Corbyn hasn't lost anything. But if they vote with the government, or if they abstain, then he gets to point at them and say, look, they were Tories in disguise all along, red Tories, and that then makes anyone else who defects, regardless of how they voted in this vote of no confidence, it makes them look like they're joining what is effectively a new Tory party. Because that, even though at the moment it's majority Labour, this new group, they're going to try and make it look like just a new moderate Conservative group, a right-wing group. That's what Labour need to do. And that is an easy way to try and get it to be done. And the other thing, I did actually say he doesn't lose anything if those Labour defectors still vote with Labour. He still gains in that situation as well, because it's almost certain that the former Conservative MPs will vote for the government. So he's straight away exposing a split in this new group. So he actually would win either way. It's something, if I were him, I would definitely do. 9, they probably need a no-deal Brexit. It sounds a little bit mad, but obviously this is something they most desperately don't want. But it's come about because of the threats to the country. This is how this new group's come about in the first place, and there's nobody in the driver's seat. But if a hard Brexit is at least avoided, then people, MPs in particular, may feel that politics has some hope of returning to normality. But normal politics won't provide the shake-up necessary for the success of this new group. They need a lot of people to be so disgusted with both Labour and the Conservatives that they feel abandoned and, oh look, there's another party that's got my back. That's what they need people to see. And I can't see any way of that happening unless there is a hard Brexit. So a no-deal Brexit could actually do them wonders. Politically, that is, even though they're all against it. And the 10th thing is, they need backing. They need to form an actual party. At the moment, they're just a group of independents who have lunch together. They need to form a new group, a new party. They're likely to need financial backing. They're certainly going to need money to be able to, fund campaigns. At the moment, they're getting free publicity on the media, much as UKIP have done as well, made great strides in. They're going to need to be good at marketing in the early days, but they are going to need backers. They're going to need finances. They're going to need a group forming so that they can get people to join the group, and they're going to need they're going to be able to need to launch campaigns that can match that of the Labour, Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats in the country, ultimately. So those are the 10 things that I think they need, and I think they need all 10, if I'm going to be honest. I think any one of those could potentially trip it up before it even really gets going. And that's why I consider it, even though it's started and even though it's been added to and who knows what's going to happen in a few weeks, this is why I still tend to veer on the side of I don't really see it, even though I can't discount it completely, just because I just look at all the things that need to happen for it to work, and it's like there's any number of pitfalls on the way here. But we will have to see. I certainly think, British politics is going to change in some way. I don't necessarily think for the better, but, time will tell. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, of course. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, click the bell notification. The poll is still active for tomorrow, although there seems to be a clear winner at the moment. And until next time, I'll see you later.